This is the weakest case I've ever seen in 60 years of practicing, teaching, and writing about criminal law. Nobody in the history of this country has ever been charged with failing to disclose hush money. If you have to disclose hush money, it's not hush money. Why would you ever pay it if you have to disclose it? People think that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler. And if you vote to acquit him, you're Goebbels and Goering, you're a facilitator. I was in that court. And I can tell you that the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC misreport what's going on in the courtroom. They report it through the prism of their own narrative of guilt. The American public has the right to see this, the right to judge Judge Marchand. I saw him acting like the psycho in the movie Taxi Driver. You talking to me? You looking at me? Come on, you looking at me? I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm going to strike your testimony. The American public had the right to see that. They had the right to see everything in this case. And we're being denied the most fundamental right to a public trial.
All right, I hope you had an enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. I hope you spent at least a few minutes reflecting on the ultimate sacrifice that so many people paid to give us the freedom that we enjoyed today. And hopefully that most and more Americans are actually appreciating. I know I took a few minutes to go by Arlington yesterday. I posted up my Instagram. It's just a reminder that those small little things, just to remind us what the days are about, matter. In a country where tradition is becoming less important. I told you last week about patriotism on the wane when it comes to younger generations. So, I hope you had a few moments to do that. But big news out of Washington and New York and the political world is Donald Trump's trial coming to an end. Alan Dershowitz is here. He breaks this down like no one else can in terms of understanding the process, the outcomes, et cetera. And we're going to get into all of that with him. Plus, I want to ask him about this flag stuff with Samuel Alito's wife. It's unbelievable what the left cares about. The closing arguments are starting. Prosecution goes, the defense goes, and the prosecution gets a second bite at the apple, which Professor Dershowitz is going to explain to us because I think this is a little weird. But anyway, a lot is happening with that. I want to explain the backdrop against where this is happening, though, because so much of this is the only trial that's going to matter. The other three, the Florida one, the classified document one down there, the Jack Smith one here, and the Georgia one, as you know, are all on ice. So this is it. This is the Democrats tried everything. I mean, they tried to get the guy off the ballot. They've tried to go after him in 4 courtrooms. This is it, man. I don't know what else they're going to throw at him, but this is the one that they've hung their hat on, and it is unbelievably weak. Unbelievably weak. Here's the one thing I want you to ask any of your Trump-hating friends or relatives. What's he being charged with? Just ask that. What do you mean he did it? No. What's he being charged with? Think about this. I'm going to ask Alan Dershowitz this. I just don't get it. And I'm obsessed with law and order, right? You always know what you're being charged with. That's the first thing they say in court, right? When you go to that arraignment, he's being charged with 4 counts of this, What's Trump being charged with? Because right now, the only thing on the books is a bookkeeping offense that passed the statute of limitations. It's in furtherance of some other crime that they haven't told him. This is so un-American. I don't get it. How do you defend yourself against a crime that you aren't being told that you committed? That's where we are. Anyway, why this all matters. Why this matters. Let me read you the opening story in Politico's playbook. Listen to this. Just listen. It says their 2 reporters take the pulse of top Democratic strategists and elected officials. And this is what Politico reports. This is like the newsletter of the DNC. Quote, a pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democratic Party over President Joe Biden's re-election prospects, even among office holders and strategists who previously expressed confidence about the coming battle with Donald Trump. A pervasive sense of confidence. This is of fear, a pervasive sense of fear. This is one Democratic operative. This isn't, oh my God, Mitt Romney might become president. It's oh my God, the democracy might end. Here's another one. There's still a path to win this, but they don't look like a campaign that's embarking on that path right now. If the frame of the race is what was better, the 3.5 years under Biden or the 4 years under Trump, we lose that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Let me repeat that, because what have I been telling you? This is an easy race, message-wise. 4 years of me, 4 years of you. What do you want to debate? Energy security, the southern border, taxes, foreign policy, you name it. This is a Democratic strategist acknowledging what I've been saying for months. Was it better, the 3.5 years under Biden or the 4 years under Trump? We lose that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. My friends, this is it. They want to do everything but talk about this because of that. Because of that. New York Democrats need to wake up, said Manhattan Borough President Mark Levin. The number of people in New York, including people of color that I come across who are saying positive things about Trump, is alarming. Is alarming. They're screwed, and they know it. They've tried everything. Kick him off the ballot, prosecute him, attack him. And they still can't beat him right now. There's more coming. There's more coming, and we know it. They tried to suppress the laptop last time, the Russia hoax. I don't know what's coming, but there's more. Trust me, there's this much is at stake. They know it. But they get it now. All right, Alan Dershowitz is coming up. But before we do that, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors because they brought to light something that I didn't fully appreciate it until I had him on the show, and we talked about this. 80 to 90% of us suffer from some form of gut issue. I had no idea until we had Tina on from Just Thrive how big of a deal this was. And I think some of the stuff is obvious, right? You think about acid reflux and all of the things that go on in our gut that we probably go, okay, that makes sense. But according to research, 99.9% of the probiotics that are on the market that a lot of people take to make their gut feel better and more healthy don't actually get to our stomach because they kind of die in the middle of it. That's why I love the products that come from Just Thrive, though. These have more clinical research than any other product on the market. They encourage things that will change our lives for the better. Energy, sleep, healthy skin, healthy weight management. All those things come from it. It's paleo, keto friendly. It's helpful if you are a child. It doesn't matter. But these are the two products that I started taking, the Just Calm and the probiotic. And you feel the difference. It happens. And for a limited time right now, you can get 20% off a 90-day supply of either the Just Calm or the probiotic if you go to justthrivehealth.com and use code word Spicer. Justthrivehealth.com, promo code Spicer. Anyway, please take a look at the products here. Go to justthrivehealth.com, use promo code Spicer, and join me on this journey. All right. We had Bernie Moreno on the show last Friday. He is that Senate candidate from Ohio that's crucial to keeping a majority. Well, Rick Scott jumped in the race. You heard me ask him about that. Senator from Florida, big-time businessman. He's shaking this race up. Previously, the race had just been John Thune of South Dakota and John Cornyn of Texas. Rick Scott's basically saying, hey, you want to make a choice? I got it for you. This Friday, we have Carrie Lake on the show. If we're going to have a majority, these folks make a difference. And then the question is, what are they going to do? Their votes are going to matter. You think about it, the race for majority leader will be like 51, 52 votes, right? That's what we're coming down to. So who they support is going to matter. And I think that's the thing. Rick Scott's willing to shake this thing up. All right, I want to bring in Alan Dershowitz. Before I do that, I do want to talk to all you fellow animal lovers out there about Delta Rescue. I've gotten to know Leo Grillo, the founder of Delta Rescue, and the work that he does to take care of animals, all kinds of animals too. It's not just dogs, it's cats, horses, you name it. To give them a no-kill sanctuary for life is unbelievable. And I've said this before if you're a long-time watcher of the show. Like, I've gotten dogs, we've supported shelters in the past. It's not a shelter. It's a sanctuary for life. And they take care of them in ways that are just unbelievable. When you go to deltarescue.org, just look at the videos. Just click on it, look at the videos, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But these animals that have often been neglected get the care that they need: veterinary care, nutritional support, etc. It's amazing what Leo Grillo's done. The problem is that it relies entirely on us. And if you're a conservative like me and aren't a big fan of government support, then we need to help out organizations that do the right thing. So please go to deltarescue.org. They rely totally on our contributions. If you can give $100, give 100. If you can give 1,000, give 1,000. If you give more, give more. But also, one thing that I've been trying to get people to do is help Leo make this enduring mission. Go to deltarescue.org, look at the estate planning kit, and see if you can help make Delta Rescue part of your legacy. Go to deltarescue.org, make a contribution, then also check out that estate planning gift guide. Thank you so much. All right. I'm pleased to bring in the man who's going to break down the Trump trials like nobody else, the author of Get Trump, and so many other amazing books. And he's got a podcast that breaks it all down on a daily basis. Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus of Harvard. All right, Professor, I'm excited about today because you're going to break it down like no one else can. Do me a favor, though. Just let's start with a lay of the land. Like what is going to happen today, tomorrow, and throughout the rest of the week?
The prosecution opens with its argument. It gets probably an hour or so to lay out its case. The defense then gets time to lay out its case, and the prosecution gets the last word. It shouldn't, because the burden of proof, is on the prosecution. Why should it get the last word? But it does, according to the law. And then the judge gives the really important set of instructions. And the key issue is going to be a guy who hasn't been at the trial, a guy named Alan Weisselberg. If I'm the defense, I get a big life-size picture of Weisselberg. I put him in the witness stand, and I say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, why did the prosecution keep this witness from you? He's the only person who could have corroborated Cohen's statement that there was an actual meeting between Trump and Cohen at which the listing of the payments and how it was done and why it was done was discussed. The defense denies that meeting ever occurred. The key witness. So where's Waldo? Where is Weisselberg? And let the jury focus on that picture in the witness stand. And if the judge gives the instruction, the missing witness instruction, which says if either party could have called a witness, and remember, only the prosecution could call Weisselberg, because he would have taken his Fifth Amendment, but the prosecution can give him immunity. The defense can't. If one party could call a witness and fails to do so, you can infer that the witness's testimony would have been unfavorable to the person that didn't call him.
Okay, so what I don't get, so let's go back to the prosecution twice issue. They get to lay out their case, why they think that President Trump is guilty. Then the defense goes, and then they get a second bite at the apple and say, okay, you've heard it both now. Let me wrap it up for you.
Yeah, which is unfair. It gives the prosecution a tremendous advantage. When I do closing arguments, I always say, I'm not being given a chance to make a final argument in this case. So the final words you'll hear are those of the prosecution. So I want you to act as my defense attorney, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I want you to imagine what I would be saying if I had an opportunity to respond to these things. But it puts a tremendous advantage on the prosecution.
Okay, so what I've heard from sort of outside pundits, they've said the defense should focus kind of what you said. Where's Alan Weisselberg in this? He's the one that can corroborate these notes and these documents. They've said two things: that the Trump campaign and the Trump team should focus on, number one, Cohen's unreliability and his continued history of lying, and number two, that Weisselberg didn't testify. Is that where you would agree that they should spend their time focusing? Is that this all lies on a convicted perjurer who admitted stealing, et cetera, and that there's key witness who could corroborate any of it isn't there?
I would do it a little differently. I would not focus on the lies he told in the past. Jurors convict all the time people who have lied in the past. I would focus on the lies he told this jury today. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this guy looked you in the eye and said he's not going to profit from a conviction in this case. This is a guy who's trying a TV show called The Fixer. He's selling products showing Donald Trump in prison. If Donald Trump doesn't go to prison, he loses money. This man looked you in the eye and lied to you, just lied to you would you buy a used car from him? If you wouldn't buy a used car from him, would you send the potential future president of the United States to prison based on his untruthful testimony? So I would focus on the lies he told to the jury rather than the lies he admitted in the past.
Brilliant. Okay, and then let's just play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say that you are Alvin Bragg's team. What is it that you want? Because all I've heard is them saying, don't worry about Michael Cohen. Focus on the documents. The documents prove that this is true. Give me your 60-second Alvin Bragg's team. What do I say to the jury before I leave?
Well, you say that you don't have to believe Cohen. You can just look at this document. And the documents do suggest that these payments were made. What they don't prove is that Donald Trump intended for these for the misstatement to be used to cover up another crime. That's an essential element of the case. The original crime is barred by the statute of limitations. So in order to convict, you have to prove that Trump, in his mind, when he or somebody on his behalf said these were legal or retainer expenses, he intended to defraud the voters, to defraud the tax people. There's no proof of that other than
well. And that's the thing that I find. I listen, you've always been so amazing at breaking this down. And this is what I just can't get my head wrapped around, that it's not against the law to pay quote unquote hush money. People do it all the time, including Congress. It's not illegal. Like, he's paying his attorney, Michael Cohen, to take care of something. I don't know. And it's an internal document. They're not filing with the state. This is a Trump Corporation document. And he's saying, great, I'm paying my lawyer. It's a lawyer fee. This is where I don't get, because this comes out of Politico this morning. It says prosecutors have offered 3 possible underlying crimes: violation of state or federal election law, and a tax crime. The jurors do not have to agree on what that separate crime was. So let's take the first part first. The violations of either state, federal, or tax law. Has Donald Trump been charged with any of those 3 things?
No, not only that, but do you think anybody in the world believes that Donald Trump was a virgin and was going to win the presidency based on his sexual conduct, behavior? Of course not. Everybody knew he was a player. And the fact that he wouldn't defraud the voters by keeping this information from them. And the idea that tax laws, he didn't take these deductions. The argument has to be that he intended 2 years hence to take these deductions. I'm not even sure they filed the tax returns for that year yet. So these are crimes of the mind.
But what I don't get as a citizen of this country, right? When you talk about like Miranda rights, talk about, things that will be used against you in a court of law. I'm sitting here watching an individual. Yes, they happen to be the leading candidate for president of the United States. But I would assume that if I were charged with something, or if I were arrested, you would say to me, as my lawyer, here's what you're being charged with. And I don't understand. I fundamentally don't understand that as an American citizen, how somebody could be sitting in a trial, be looking at their lawyer and saying, what am I being charged with? And the answer coming back, I don't know.
Well, you get the A+. You're right. And the judge and the prosecutor is wrong. They get the D-. You're absolutely right. The Constitution requires that a defendant be given fair notice of what he's being charged with.
But how do we get here? I mean, that's what, again, I don't mean to sound hyperbolic, but I don't understand how anybody, never mind someone like this, and we're all sitting around having these conversations on television and in podcasts, et cetera. You do it all the time. It's like, you've written books on this. I just don't get it. Like, this isn't Harvard law. This isn't an Alan Dershowitz class. This is literally con law at like a community college where someone goes, yes, you have to be told what you're being charged with. And I don't understand how fundamentally we can be at a place where somebody is in a court of law facing a jury for a charge they don't know that they're being charged with.
You can't understand this unless you understand the concept of Get Trump. I entitled my book, Get Trump, not because I'm such a great title maker, because both the prosecutor in Manhattan and the prosecutor in the state of New York promised to get Trump. That was the goal. And they couldn't find any crime, so they made one up. And this is a made-up crime. This is a crime that could have gotten Alexander Hamilton convicted when he paid hush money back in the day. Nobody in history, and I challenge anybody to dispute this, Nobody in the history of this country has ever been charged with failing to disclose hush money. If you have to disclose hush money, it's not hush money. Why would you ever pay it if you have to disclose it? Hush money is designed to keep a secret, and it's legal.
So let's get to the second part of that quote from Politico that I read. The jurors do not have to agree on what the separate crime was. Well, that's, again, getting back to my very simplistic understanding. My understanding has always been that the jury had to agree on the charges. If they don't have to agree, isn't that by nature an acquittal?
It should be. And the law is terrible on this issue. I've been fighting this issue now for, 40, 50 years. I've litigated a bunch of cases on this. But the law is today that when you have the secondary crime, you can have 3 jurors thinking it's defrauding the state, 3 jurors thinking it's defrauding federal voters, 3 jurors thinking that it's a tax violation. You don't need it. And you also don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to prove it by a preponderance. I hope that the lawyers for Trump will raise these constitutional issues and say, whatever the law was, it can't be applied fairly in this case. If 3 jurors can decide maybe he did this, maybe he did that, maybe he did the other thing. This is the weakest case I've ever seen in 60 years of practicing, teaching, and writing about criminal law. I don't know of any case in American history that's weaker than this. Yet my colleague, Professor Lawrence Tribe, and my former student, Norm Eisen, on CNN think this is the strongest case since the Lincoln assassination, if the Lincoln assassination had been videotaped. This is so weak. And even to this day, we can't figure that out. What I'm hoping is that the jury will scratch their heads and say, what is this about? Turn to the 2 lawyers who were on the jury, and the 2 lawyers will say, we have no idea what this case is about. The judge is going to try to make it simple. But in doing so, I think he'll prejudice the defendant. We'll see.
You brought up the 2 lawyers that are on the jury. Does it help or hurt Trump that 2 people who supposedly know the law are on the jury?
Well, they're civil lawyers. They're not criminal lawyers. And we don't really know what kind of expertise they have. But I don't think it could hurt. First of all, jurors are less likely, I think, to be influenced by other people. So if you have a juror who is a lawyer holding out, less likely to be influenced. In my experience, if you only get 1 or 2 people holding out, often they will go along with the majority. If you get a group of 3 or 4, they usually will stick. So we'll wait and see. I think a hung jury is possible here. I was in the courtroom last week, and the one thing I observed, I couldn't tell whether the jury was convicting or acquitting, but I could tell they didn't seem to get along. They were not friendly to each other. And that encourages the possibility of a hung jury.
I don't know if this happened to you over the weekend, but it happened to us here in Northern Virginia. We had storms like every night, and I'm talking hardcore, lightning, thunder. And it was interesting. My daughter got a little worried. My wife said, don't worry, we got a generator. That's right. I've told you this before, folks. I don't know when something's going to happen. Hopefully it's just maybe a couple hours, but it could be days, it could be months, weeks, because of an attack on our electrical grid. The question is, are you going to be ready? I am, because I have a Patriot Power Generator 2000X in my house. If something happens, we can power everything. The refrigerator, tablets, computers, phones, anything that's important, medical devices. And we can bring it into the house because it runs on solar power. And the panels come free with it. That's right. The solar panel comes free with it. You don't have to worry about gas, fumes, noise. It's amazing. You bring it in your house. You can pour it anywhere you want. Put it in your car, bring it to a friend's house. Maybe they lose power or a family member. But you will be ready with the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. Go right now to 4patriots.com/Spicer, 4patriots.com/Spicer, and check this thing out. Because when something happens, like I said, we had every night this weekend, massive, massive thunder and lightning storms. Thank God nothing happened, but we were ready. And that's the key. Be ready with the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, 4patriots.com/Spicer. Before we get to possible outcomes, the jury instructions you referenced, explain, has this been agreed to? In other words, has the prosecution and the defense agreed to what the judge is about to instruct the jury, and how important are these instructions to their deliberations?
Instructions are crucial. Although in New York, you're not supposed to take the jury instructions with you in writing. So jurors will have to remember these very complicated instructions. No, I don't think there's agreement. I think there'll be some real disagreement. And we don't know yet what the instructions will be. I think the lawyers know what the instructions will be, but as soon as we know, we'll have a much better assessment of what the likely outcomes of the case might be.
And if Trump were, so let's walk through this. You said potentially a hung jury.
Yeah.
What is that? What at what level? What point does it become hung? In other words, do they have to deliberate for a certain number of days? Do a certain number have to disagree? What constitutes that, and what's the likelihood of that versus an acquittal?
Yeah, well, we don't know how many disagree or agree. That's never told. It's only the length of time. And then the judge gives what they call the dynamite instruction. I call it the X-lax instruction. It's to loosen up the jurors and make them come to a unanimous verdict. And sometimes the judge can put an enormous amount of pressure on the jury to agree, particularly when you have a long trial like this. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to think that you've done all this for nothing. But a hung jury is an important part of our legal system. And if the jurors don't agree, the judge should not pressure them to agree.
So at what point, though, if they come back, is it a day or two where they say, Your Honor, we can't come to a decision, we're hung? Or does he get to decide that? Does he get to keep sending them back?
He gets to keep sending them back. There's a limit to what he can do, but he keeps sending them back. I've seen cases where juries send notes 3, 4, 5 times, and the judge sends them back, and they ultimately decide. I've seen cases where they ultimately decide, and then 3 days later, one of the jurors says, "Oh, gee, I really feel like I was pressured. I should have hung the jury." Yeah.
So let's talk about that pressure for a second. I mean, you mentioned the pressure the judge can exert sometimes. But what I have maintained all along is that as soon as this case is done, these individuals are going to be figured out. Their names are going to come out in the media in somehow. That's at least, maybe you disagree with that, but I believe that they're going to come out. And if I were a New Yorker, I would feel some sense of concern about my safety, my personal safety, my family's safety, if I were voting to acquit President Trump on these charges. Do you agree? And if so, does that play into a factor where one or two of these guys, I've always maintained kind of what you were saying, which is that if it's one or two people holding out, they'll cave. If there's 3 or 4, I think there's a possibility of acquittal because of the peer pressure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I also think there'll be enormous pressure on jurors not to acquit in New York. I can tell you that from my personal experience on Martha's Vineyard and in New York, where when I defended Trump on the floor of the Senate, I lost all of my friends, relatives turned against me. People think that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler. And if you vote to acquit him, you're Goebbels and Goering, you're a facilitator. That's the way I've been treated by the zealots on Martha's Vineyard. And I'm, a pretty strong guy with a thick skin. Imagine a typical juror saying, gee, do I really want to go home to my family and be perceived as the guy who voted to allow this guy to be our next president? So I think there'll be an enormous amount of pressure on New Yorkers to convict.
Okay, so let's walk through these outcomes, right? So he could be acquitted.
Yeah.
Okay, and that just requires one person to literally hold out the whole time? Is that?
No, acquittal, it has to be 12-0.
An acquittal has to be 12-0 or a guilty?
Yeah, both.
Okay, so if we get anywhere in between, then that's what constitutes a hung jury.
11-1 for conviction is a hung jury. 11-1 for acquittal is a hung jury. If it's 11-1 to acquittal, it won't be tried again. But if it's 11-1 for conviction, it probably would be tried again. So that's one result. Then the other 2 results, obviously, guilt and innocence. And then there's a 4th result, a compromise verdict, which is often the case, but very hard in this case, because in this case, in order to turn the misdemeanor into a felony, remember, the misdemeanor is barred by the statute of limitations. You have to conclude that he intended to commit another crime. And that would be hard to do. So you might get compromises about which crime it is, but under the jury instruction, that doesn't matter. So I don't think there'll be a compromise verdict here. I think it'll be one of the 3.
Okay, so if he were to be convicted, there's stories that the Secret Service is potentially looking at, how they would handle him going to jail. On a scale of 1 to 10, how realistic is that's even possible, considering the charge and the possible sentencing for something of this level?
Well, it's very possible that he could be sent symbolically, 1 to either house arrest. in Trump Towers, or he could be sentenced to weekends in prison. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible.
But on a case like this, that's what I'm getting at. On a case that's about bookkeeping, you would send. I mean, I look at New York. They're letting people out of jail for punching people and all sorts of felonies, and they're going to convict someone and send them to any kind of jail for something like this?
It's not anyone, it's Donald Trump. And it's not anyone, it's Judge Marchand. So don't put anything by him. I can tell you some of my colleagues at Harvard will urge imprisonment, not because it's the right thing, but because it's Donald Trump.
Okay, so let's say that happens. I assume that immediately there would be an appeal. If that appeal happens, does that, and I get that in a normal course of action, would the judge then keep him free on remand or something like that?
99.9% of cases, he would be allowed to stay out on bail. This is Donald Trump. Of course he has to be able to stay out on bail. He's not violent. He's not likely to escape. Where's he going to go? So the issue is, does he have substantial issues on appeal? I know that better than anybody on the country because I've argued more successful appeals in criminal cases probably than any living lawyer. And I can tell you the chances of winning on appeal here are very, very substantial. So if he were denied bail, it would be a total miscarriage of justice.
So just out of curiosity, you're Judge Marchand and you're looking at this and you're not a dummy. You may not like Donald Trump, but you're not a dummy. And you got to know at least some. He clearly doesn't know as much as you because he would be you. But he has to know that if I'm going to get appealed, that's not going to look good. Does that factor into any of this?
No, because in New York, it wouldn't matter. In New York, he'd be a hero. If he convicted, even if it's reversed on appeal, they would blame it on the Court of Appeals or on the appellate division.
Let me ask you this. I brought this up a couple times with different guests. Are you an advocate for television cameras in the courtroom?
100%. And this is the case that proves it more than anything. I was in that courtroom, and I can tell you that the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC misreport what's going on in the courtroom. They report it through the prism of their own narrative of guilt. The American public has the right to see this, the right to judge Judge Marchand. I was in the courtroom when Judge Marchand cleared the courthouse, cleared the courtroom, and I saw him acting like the psycho in the movie Taxi Driver. You talking to me? You looking at me? Come on, you looking at me? I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm going to strike your testimony. The American public had the right to see that. They had the right to see everything in this case. And we're being denied the most fundamental right to a public trial. Let's remember, the Sixth Amendment right to a public trial is not only to protect the defendant, it's to protect the public and allow the public to see the trial. So every trial should be available for television. But a case like this, of course it should be on television. So should the other three cases. But the federal government doesn't allow television in the courtroom.
But you don't think that doing that would act? I'm always worried that if that happens, it becomes more of a circus. That's to you not an issue?
No, I argued a number of the motions in the O.J. Simpson case, yes, and I appeal in the Von Bulow case, all on television. I didn't even know it was on television. I just didn't.
I did. This is how I first got to know Alan Dershowitz. So growing up in Rhode Island, that Klaus Von Bulow case. Yeah. I became enamored with whether he killed Sonny or not from a young age. But that's when I first saw you in operation. Okay. So two more things before I let you go. This issue about Samuel Alito and his wife flying flags. I want you to weigh in on it just from a judicial standpoint, whether or not his wife's actions matter. But secondly, the thing that I find funny is if you're the left and these folks in the media right now, this is an absolute travesty what his wife has done flying these flags. But they don't have a problem with Judge Marchand making political contributions and his daughter making millions of dollars with clients that have an outcome. I don't know how to square that circle. What do you think about the actions that Mrs. Alito may have taken with these flags?
Look, I think it was a mistake. I think if you're married to a justice, you err on the side of neutrality and objectivity. Justice Harlan didn't even vote in elections because he didn't want to be influenced in any way. So I'm sorry that he did this. Sam Alito is a very nice guy. I know him. I like him. And he has his perspectives. They're different from mine, but I respect him. Judge Marchand is much more recusable because his daughter might make a profit. off a conviction and off rulings in this case. Also, remember that the left didn't say much when Ruth Bader Ginsburg said what a terrible thing it would be if Donald Trump were elected to be president. She was sitting on the bench at the time. So we have to have one standard. The Supreme Court should have a code of ethics that binds them, and the code of ethics should prohibit the flying of flags and the making of statements. All sides have to be a lot more cautious.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting, you bring up Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There's this story this weekend about how she used to wear this collar when she was dissatisfied with a ruling, and it was like no one had a problem with that. The last thing, you obviously, your latest book deals with Israel, so I want to just ask you this big issue that happened over the weekend: 45 civilians dead in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, is expressing sorrow for their deaths. Is that legally an issue for him or not, or just a political issue? Oh,
it's just a political issue. Look, nobody claims, except maybe Macron of France and maybe the ICC, nobody claims that Israel deliberately targeted any civilians. Of course they did not. They targeted the two horrible terrorists that they killed. Then apparently some shrapnel hit a car or hit an oil depot, and it's a terrible accident. But it wasn't an accident that was the responsibility of Israel, except in the most indirect way. So it's a tragedy. Let's mourn the really innocent people. I'm not talking about the women who are women, but also a terrorist, or the 19-year-olds who will call children and carry RPGs. I'm talking about real babies and children and people who are not involved. Let's mourn them. But, it's all the fault of Hamas for putting their terrorists among civilians and for starting this whole war by killing 1,300 innocent Israelis. So let's put the blame where it belongs.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right. Well, that's why you've got a book for everything. That's the beautiful part about all this. To really get more in depth with all of them. As always, thank you for being here, sir. Look forward to next time. All right, folks, what an amazing conversation with Alan Dershowitz. So much to break down. And I love the way that he broke down both the Trump trials, where things are headed, and then the Alito stuff. So let's do the Trump trial thing first. I said this at the beginning, and I'll say it again. I just can't believe we live in a country where you aren't told what you're facing. Isn't that crazy? How do you ask your attorneys to present a defense if you don't know what you're up against? And it doesn't have to be unanimous. I think those were two bedrock principles of our judicial system that aren't being upheld. I don't understand this. Now, if he gets let go, gets a hung jury, because I learned more about that today. I always assumed, I never realized what the threshold was, but then again, I didn't go to law school. The left is going to lose their mind. Now, I agree with Dershowitz. I think that regardless, it'll go to appeal, and for 1,000,001 reasons, it'll be fine. But these guys are so desperate. I said this at the beginning. They're trying to get him. They don't care about the rule of law. Keep that in mind. All right. I want to tell you a little bit about Samuel Alito's wife's flag. I brought this up with them. Here's why this is important. There was a story that came out over the weekend that apparently the Washington Post has known about this for 3 years. Well, let me tell you what they knew about. This is it. This is the line in Axios. The most interesting story in yesterday's Washington Post was on A3, like anyone reads a newspaper anymore. And it was 1,221 days late. It turns out that the Post's former Supreme Court reporter actually did a front yard interview with Justice Samuel Alito on January 20th, 2021, and just waited on the story. Well, why? Well, here's what it revealed. When the reporter went to Alito's home to check on a tip, i.e. that there was a flag flying, this is what he writes. Martha Ann Alito was visibly upset by his presence, the reporter, demanding that he get off his property. Yeah, I would too. Get off my property. Alito interviewed and directed his wife into a parked car where they had been headed out of their way of the neighborhood. The justice denied the flag was hung upside down as a political protest, saying it stemmed from a neighborhood dispute and indicated that his wife had raised it. Martha Ann Alito then got out of the car, the Post continues, and shouted in apparent reference to the neighbors, asked them why they did it, right? Apparently the neighbors had put out very personal attacks and on signs towards the Alito's house. She said yard signs about the couple had been placed in the neighborhood after getting back in the car. She exited again and then brought out from their residence a novelty flag, the type that you would typically decorate a garden, hoisted it up the flag and said, "Is that better?" The Post decided not to report on the episode at the time because the flag raising appeared to be the work of Martha Ann Alito rather than the justice and connected to a dispute with her neighbor. It was not clear that the argument was rooted in politics. Okay, then so what? It wasn't rooted in politics, had nothing to do with him. But now it's a story 3 years later. Why? Why? I don't get this. You answered the question 3 years, but now peer pressure. Oh my God, the New York Times is writing about it. So we now have to revive it and beg for forgiveness. Sorry, New York Times and other liberal journalists that we didn't write this story that didn't make any sense 3 years ago, but we now see the greater problem. You morons. This is the problem with journalism. It wasn't a story 3 years ago. She was having a neighborhood dispute. They concluded that. But now, because your peer pressure buddies at the New York Times and Axios and everywhere else are attacking Justice Alito, that we got to write about it. We got to make something out of this. We're not going to write about Judge Marchand. No. We're not going to write about his daughter making and raising millions of dollars for opponents of Trump. No. We know about that in the here and now, but we're not going to write out. We'll go back and write a story from 3 years ago that we knew wasn't a story 3 years ago. A couple other things that I want to get to. Number one, big RFK update. Why does that matter? Well, the debates, everyone was trying to keep him out. There's a possibility he makes this first CNN debate at the end of June. He has to have two things. One, he has to be on at 15% in 4 polls, and he's got 3 right now. He's going to get to 4th. He'll be okay on that front. Then the question is, can he show a path to 270 delegates? And right now, he appears to meet the polling requirement. And that's going to be interesting. 5 states confirmed to ABC News that Kennedy is qualified for the ballot in Delaware, Hawaii, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Utah. And Utah. YouTube. He's on the YouTube ballot. He's on the Utah ballot. It says it's at 201 electoral votes in terms of their strategy. And it claims to have submitted signature ballots in access for 7 additional states, which would total 139, with enough signatures for 8 others. So keep in mind, there's 2 things here. There's what the Kennedy campaign says and what the secretaries of states agree. You can say you're on a ballot until they certify it and say you're going to appear. It doesn't count. Keep that in mind. It's like so many other things. The reality is sometimes a little off and different. So if he makes this debate, I think this is going to be a big game changer in terms of the dynamic of the debate. Because if you listen to his speech at the Libertarian convention over the weekend where he and Trump both spoke, and neither of them even came close to getting the nomination, he took a lot of pot shots at President Trump. And it's not like normally if you're the incumbent, you're really worried that they're both coming after you, but he's going after both equally. And I think that he knows that he's got a good chance. He's been doing a lot of right-wing media for a reason. I think that because of his position on vaccines in particular, that he thinks that he has a real shot there. So he's got the sort of the old school Democratic liberal crazy stuff locked in. But I'm telling you, keep an eye on this, because if he gets on that debate stage, it's Katie bar the door, man. Who does he go after more? It's playing 3-dimensional chess, not checkers anymore. Now you got to look after both flanks at all times. So keep that in mind. The National Republican Senatorial Committee said that they're targeting 4 states: Maryland, Montana, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. You notice I didn't say Arizona. What does Carrie Lake think of that? How does it affect her strategy? What is she doing to win that state and put it in the Republican column? We're going to ask her on Friday. So get ready to tune in. Thanks for kicking off your week with us. I appreciate this. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Continue to subscribe: YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, any of the eyes you can go to. It's great to subscribe to all of them, though. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.